The championship begins anew, and the drivers will be sent into the perilous La Source hairpin right off the bat. Better watch out. That first step is a doozy as we get ready for PCA Sim Racing Series 14 Club Class. And you'll see it all live here on RaceSpotTV. I am Joe Peak, and with me in the booth tonight is Ron Mons. Behind the scenes is our director, Hugo Louise. We're thrilled to have Princess Cruises as the 2025 PCA title sponsor. And as the official cruise vacation partner of Series 14, they provide exclusive offers, including world-leading itineraries across a fleet of 16 elegant ships sailing to more than 330 global destinations. Reach out to the PCA concierge team to book your next adventure today by calling 833-679-2188. Ron, we have started things off at an incredible track. Let's take a look at the schedule coming up here for this season.
Yeah, I know. It's just another fantastic season that we have to look forward to here in the Porsche Club of America. As you just said, getting it all up and rolling tonight here at Spa. Watkins Glen next time out. We go to a lot of classic American road courses in the form of Watkins Glen, Indy the week after, well, a couple of weeks after, I should say, there on October the 2nd, Laguna Seca 2 weeks later. Then we go on a little bit of a European kick with Aragon, a rather interesting addition to this season calendar. Zolder a couple of weeks later, and VIR to bring this season to a close in early December. Some pretty good tracks to look forward to. I know yesterday on that pro broadcast, we talked about Aragon being a rather interesting addition, but I'll go on a limb and say the week afterwards, Zolder, that's going to be another intriguing race. That track could really bite these competitors. So looking forward to really all the tracks, but those two certainly standing out in my book.
I do love when they give them a challenge for the various track choices in this series. And this one, no doubt, every single time provides quite a challenge for the drivers. It is notorious for that. But we wait for the first lap times to come in as we see Kevin Orr starting his first flying lap. As we saw yesterday, it is tough to try to get all 3 laps in. So anybody that has waited too long will probably only see 2 of their 3 completed, Ron.
Yeah, as I said yesterday, no opportunities to lollygag around. You got to hit the ground running in this session. Utilize this time to the best of your availability. As we saw a lot of yesterday evening as well in that Pro Class race, there is that very strong chance that you can go through all 3 of these laps and not be able to set any representative lap times, either with a mistake out there on the track that really affects your time, or a mistake out there that's going to pick up a 1X and invalidate that time. So these racers really need to put in some importance in this qualifying session. We saw it prove to be rather vital with a messy start in that race yesterday evening. But that La Source hairpin, as you said, right in the open, Joe, that is a real choke point for these racers. So probably making this qualifying session one of the most important ones from the entirety of the season.
Yeah, if you missed the start of last night's race, we went 3 wide, and not only did one of the drivers wind up with a meatball flag getting involved in an accident going for the lead there at the very first corner, another driver was given a black flag penalty. So basically, of one of the 3, just was able to scoot away from everybody while the other 2s languished down at the bottom of the field. So it was a bit of a rout up at the front. Rest of them, though, gave us a lot of action. Heimbecker looks like he's our quickest of those that have set a time so far. Doran, 0.5 of a second off of him, back in second place. We saw similar gaps at the end of qualifying yesterday. Amazing how close and competitive each of the classes are in this season, Ron.
Yeah, super close. These racers have been around the block before in their respective series, so they know what to expect to a certain extent heading off into these races. We talked a lot about shaking the rust off, and that will certainly be a case in this race that lies ahead. But you also have confident drivers in a car that they're comfortable with around a track as well that they have a lot of experience running around. I would say in terms of the top 5 iRacing tracks that are the most popular ones in the sim, I'll probably put Spa very high up on that list, maybe even at the top of it. It is a super popular track. Everybody has at least a little bit of experience running around this track, and that could very much so contribute into why this field is packed in like sardines right now.
So now on board with Mark Doran, who's been pushed down to 3rd. Gerbino, is up to 2nd and 14 thousandths off the pole time. of Heimbecker. This is a good sign that we've got a race on our hands up at the front. The other thing that does contribute to the distance between the lap times on these cars is they don't do this like they do in most series to try and figure out classes where a lot of times we'll see leagues organize drivers by either a pre-qualifying or by their I rating or some sort like that. No, they actually average the lap times over the entirety of the season, and then they remove outliers of the fastest and the slowest so that they don't have anything that's kind of throwing it off. And then they put everybody into their classes according to those averaged lap times. And you can see it works a treat because we tend to have incredibly close fights, and very few drivers tend to go a lap down as well. As last night, I think we had only one. But Doran is going to try and finish this second lap and go up a couple spots. But before that, he does get demoted as he crosses the line. 22.4 is an improvement, but he only finds himself fourth as Robert Neville is now your quickest.
And you can see the gaps ballooning up at the front, but with this next wave of lap times getting put on the board, I'm sure those gaps going to absolutely diminish. We look at Andy Jenks heading his way off through the final two turns, currently qualified in P15 in that number 31 car. Let's see what he can do as he comes across the line. Will it be an improvement from him? It will be an improvement. Yeah, potentially. Yeah, there it is. P7 for him at that lap there. Well done from the number 31. Now only a half a second off of Robert Neville, who's made that call to come down pit lane. His qualifying session now officially done. Let's see if his current front row sitter of Kellen Heimbecker can put in a good lap time. It's only about 0.3 of a second that the driver of the number 14 car needs to try and improve on to jump up to the pole. That is not a very hard task. It can be a little bit tricky to do, but you have got a lot of opportunities. Even if you just get a little bit closer in to one of the apexes around this track, that can make a huge difference because it is a rather lengthy lap, this.
Yeah, and right now he's been hovering at about 2 to 3/10 better than his previous laps. So I think he could try and jump up to that top spot. Neville has parked the car. He's done with his 3 laps and he sits at a 2:22 flat, essentially. Gibson not that far behind Heimbecker either, so Kellen probably just wants a good lap to make himself safe and not lose that front row start. We ride on board down into Stavelo 1, taking a nice line down to that apex and just tracking out as he picks up speed coming up to Blanchimont. This is a corner that is a real test for the drivers, especially in these 992 Cup cars.
Yeah, very, very big test of your bravery. Let's listen in. A little bit of a lift there, a little bit of a lift off the gas pedal. You kind of have to do that, though, heading off to that part of the track. If you try and go through there flat out, you may feel brave, but you're also going to feel the hit. You're going to feel the hit into the wall that will most likely follow as a result of all that. I've tried to do that in the 911 GT3 cars, which, bearing in mind, a decent amount different than this, as across the line for Heimbecker. Not going to improve, so that's P3, and now dropping down to P4 is Mark Doran jumping up to the pole.
Wow. So Mark Doran's last lap, a huge improvement over his previous ones. Waiting till the last moments as the clock ticks down to 0. Anybody on a lap is now done with their qualifying. A huge change right at the end before we head into the warm-up. And Doran stealing that pole. So everybody's going to be watching that 486 once we get to the race to make sure he isn't hiding anything pace-wise once we get to the racing itself. And let's take a look and see how he stole this one away. We've got the laps pulled up here, Ron.
And let's see, gang, the run out of turn number 1. Perfect. You can see him utilizing that curb on the outside, acing the power down as he comes out of there. We talked about this a lot last night, and there's a lot of truth said in it. That turn number 1, of course, very important on the first lap of the race, but very important in this qualifying session as well. Get a good run coming out there, and you're going to be smelling like a bed of roses heading down this Camel straightaway up through Rouge and Radion. He went rather expertly crafted through there. Now into the braking zone, which will be a fantastic overtaking opportunity for these racers all throughout tonight's race. There he goes down into third through the turn. You can see him utilizing the curb a little bit there on the inside, borderline stuff. One good thing that you can see from these pole laps that separates the very strong times from the slightly less strong times is the racer's confidence in terms of utilizing the track limits. If you can hit that mark just about perfectly and find that limit of, okay, how much asphalt can I use? How much of this exit curb can I use? If you can find that sweet spot, you could really set in a cooker.
Yeah, so much harder to try and find that edge when you don't have the grass or the gravel off to the side there that lets you know when you're starting to get close to that edge, like right there, where there's a lot that can be gained just by tracking out. So second half of the lap now into Fanyes, and this is really showing why he took that pole away. Just an impressive run from one edge of the track to the other through every single corner, not missing a spot. I haven't seen anything that's looked out of sorts at all. Nice and smooth coming out of Stavelo 2. And once again, we pick up speed in the 486. This is one of the fastest parts of the track coming up to Blanchimont. Really trying to flick it into there, like we heard mentioned by Ron. These cars don't have the downforce that the 911 GT3Rs do. The GT3 Cup, obviously, is a lot less downforce and a lot of power, too. So it makes it quick in a straight line, but diabolical on some of these fast corners. But just a small correction and an even teeny tiny one, frankly, to wrap things up and to give himself the pole position of 2:21.7, the only driver to break below 2:22 in this entire field.
Yeah, and that is a statement lap there from Doran. As we said at the time, where did he come from? It was a massive improvement at the end of that session. So let's see if he'll be able to hold on to that come time for this race that lies ahead. Of course, though, in a 1 hour long race, there's so much in it outside of just having the raw speed. You got to master this track. It is a track that, despite these racers having a whole lot of experience on, as we kind of talked about a little bit last night, Joe, it can be a track where overconfidence can be a bit of a worry. If you say, you know what, I know this track, I know it like the back of my hand, let me attack this turn, and that is the exact point in time where the rear end probably going to try and overtake the front end. So that's the sort of thing these racers have to worry about all throughout it, just mastering the track. Of course, the pitch strategy was a huge factor in last night's race, so let's just keep an eye on it. I think it's going to be a very tough opening round of the championship for these racers.
Yeah, about a minute left before we get to the gridding on that one. This is Neville, who also was looking quite quick in that session. He'll be on the outside of the front row. I do love the theming that he's got going on, all matched up with his camera and everything. So well done to Robert. Even his outfit. Look at his shirt. It even matches the car.
See, I'm trying to think now. I don't think his walls match the plaid as well. I gotta say, I am very much so a fan of the plaid. I love blue. It's my favorite color. It's the color I have on the walls in my broadcast booth, which is literally just my bedroom. It's all blue. I adore blue and I adore plaid. So looking at this car make me rather happy throughout this season. That 087 car. We're gonna be keeping eyes on that Carolinian driver, both for the speed out there on the racetrack and what I am already going to say is my favorite paint scheme that I've seen thus far this season.
So this last little bit is going to give them maybe a tiny bit of information, but not much. By now, they really need to have things settled down, especially their strategy, which we will talk about a lot as the race goes on. We saw last night that can play a rather big part. You need to make sure and nail it. And for some of the drivers, not only do you need to respect the speed limit into that pit lane, but you have to respect the pit entry line, as a couple drivers did get penalties for crossing over that. So as we take a look at the grid, Mark Doran on the top spot, who we followed on board, will be flanked by Robert Neville to his outside. John Gibson then starts in P3 with Kellen Heimbecker starting in fourth. After that, it is Scott Bowers in fifth with Ryan Cowley in the sixth position. Charlie Boyer starts seventh today. Jake Gerbino in the eighth position. while Devin Hopkins starts 9th, and then row 5 has Andy Jenks rounding out the top 10. Jared Gregory will be 11th, as James Martin will be the end of the first dozen, while Mike Matson starts 13th. Mark Rondeau will be P14 today, Dean Chapman in 15th. Aaron Sunday, who continues to climb up the various classes, will be starting in 16th. Dale Green will be 17th, and Chris Sherburne in the 18th position. From there, Jeremy Hall starts 19th, and then the outside of row 10 is Rex Jarawala. After that, it's Anthony Carbone Jr. in 21st. Peter Sigourney starts 22nd, and Kevin Orr in 23rd. Jonathan Reber then rounds out your first 24, followed by Marcel Eunice in the quarter century mark. Aaron Nations then starts in 26, Patrick Adamczyk in the 27th spot, and Ben Bulkley in 28th. Steve Komatz will start 29th. Top 30 sees Jason Barrett on the end of that group. After that, it's Gary Reese in 31st, Charlie Ferrer in 32nd, Nathan Abuhaka starting P33 today. Christian Braun will be on the outside there in the 34th. Kenneth Eskridge starts 35th, and Ken Tubman in the 36th spot, with the last few being Dennis Lynn in 37th, David Nelson in 38th, and Chad Casion in 39th. None of them set laps at this in qualifying, so they are going to be with starting with a lot of hard work to do here at the start of this race. Meanwhile, up at the very front, we are getting ready to go as the pace car is in. Now remember, they have to wait for the call from the flag stand. We had a bit of a false start last time. We kind of do this time as well, as Doran is well ahead, but it looks like he holds his pace once he accelerated as the green flag is out. This time, will Doran be single file into that first turn? Are we going to see another 3 wide as Neville tries to catch up? He's going to have to follow his lead, as behind him there is some 3 wide a little farther back, but everyone gives each other plenty of space coming down through La Source. Ron, this is what I like to see on that first corner.
Yeah, very kind and considerate from these racers as they headed their way off through turn number 1. But now, as we careen our way off through Eau Rouge, up the hill into Radion, I got to imagine it's only a matter of time before these racers begin to throw haymakers at each other. A meatball flag for Dennis Lynn. May have been a moment for the 124 car, as he's going to have to drop back to come in to serve that. Now, look at these racers snaking their way down the Camel straightaway off into the Lacombe chicane. Mark Doran still holding on to the race lead from the pole position. However, right behind, racers all starting to duke it out.
Yeah, still plenty of drivers trying to outbreak one another coming into Lacombe. I think Lynn got a bit of a hit coming into La Source, hence why he had that black and orange flag. In the meantime, Doran leads, Neville still remaining in second. In fact, the top 12, if I'm seeing this correctly, have not changed positions, which is kind of crazy considering how many opportunities you see coming into La Source. But Doran leads Neville, leads Gibson, leads Heimbecker, with Bowers rounding out your top 5.
Yeah, there was a little bit of squabbling between those racers, but all in all, they're not really throwing caution to the wind yet. Keyword being yet. As we get a little bit farther along into the season opening race, we may start to see these racers push the issue and really start to risk it a little bit more as we follow your P18 runner. Right now, you can see the sideways snaps from Rex Jarawala as he heads his way off through Fania. That was off through turn number 12. It was, the first part of that section. You can see him sawing out the wheel. Nice to see a good view of these racers show. I love to see these cameras, to see these racers in the sim, because you can see the manual inputs that go in, sawing out the wheel, balancing the pedals. You also see the driver's body language as well. Really good to kind of psychoanalyze that in an odd way, especially when some of these racers are involved in very close battles, doubly so towards the end of this race.
And all the varieties of sim rigs that they've got as well. That was way off by Rex coming through Blanchimont, so that's going to be a 1X for him. He's got to watch out. We saw at least one driver get DQ'd because of that in last night's race, so you can't abuse them too hard. And Rex still putting the pressure on. By the way, if you notice Peter Sigourney suddenly show up, he had a disconnect right when they were gridding, so he's back out there and running again, but he is at the very back of the field on the lead lap. Oof, we got a little bit of a fight here with Charlie Boyer on the heels of Jake Gerbino up and across Radion. He gets a very good run, but did he cut a little bit too far? No, he was within the boundaries, and he starts to run away from Boyer, who's now under threat from Devin Hopkins. And coming into the braking zone of Lacombe, Hopkins shows his nose, but then reconsiders.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I am gobsmacked that one. Oh, contact being made, a bump and run attempted there as they headed their way off through the chicane. Thought that was going to end in disaster for Boyer and Hopkins, but to keep it going in a straight line. Thought that was going to end in a slowdown for the 113. iRacing, sometimes the way they judge is a little bit iffy, and I am still gobsmacked that he was able to get away with that rather scot-free. Didn't pick up a slowdown. Saw that a lot throughout last night's race. Drivers picking up those slowdowns, heading off through that section where they're at the limit of adhesion, the limit of control, and a small little trip up like that can be it can be a game changer. For some cases, it can be a total game ender if you have a moment like that. Pick up a slowdown, whether it be coming through there or whether it be coming out of Stavolo onto that back flat out blast of the track. You pick up a slowdown at a bad time around here, and you're going to be chopped meat.
Yeah, it can be extremely painful, especially in these early stages where you're going to lose so much track position. So drivers do need to mind their P's and Q's out there to make sure that they don't lose position. Somebody going a little bit off into the gravel there for a brief moment. That's Hopkins at the front of this group. Boyer seems to have lost speed, and now Andy Jenks is starting to accelerate away. Gregory has to lift, so that costs him an opportunity, and that's James Martin at the back in the purple and black machine. So Jenks will get a spot from all the melee that happened there, but will anybody try anything coming into the bus stop chicane? A few drivers kind of sticking their nose out. Somebody gets a little bit of contact. I think that was Martin and Sunday involved in that one. And then behind them, yet more chaos. Is now we got a car spinning. It is a disastrous final chicane for numerous cars.
Yeah, that I believe is the number 31 of Andy Jenks spun around coming out of the turn. Yes, it is the Northeastern driver with a spin. He's now facing Northeast outside of the turn, and you can see another car slow on the inside of the final part of that chicane that feels like two hairpins glued together as there's more drama. That's a 36 around. That I believe is off in turn number 1. Really, all the drama breaking out right about now.
That's Kevin Orr. Yeah, I wonder if he had a little help to send him out there. It was difficult to see if there was any sort of damage, but we're watching the battle right now between Bowers and Cowley, but Bowers will outbrake him. Oh, too much. He outbrakes himself, and he goes off the course as there's another car off into the gravel, and that is Heimbecker. Oh, my gosh. Heimbecker, who was up at the front, suddenly plunging down the order. He is down to 18th by the time he gets going.
Yeah, Heimbecker, disastrous run off through the chicane for him. Gotta wonder whether or not things got a little bit physical there. Not trying to see if there's any sort of damage on that machine. No, he just overcooked it big time off through there. Not sure if that was a lockup or if he missed his braking marker by a country mile, but either way, you can see it, way too quick into the turn. Tries to keep it going, but as soon as he gooses up the throttle on the dirty part of the track, far away from the racing line, around he goes, spinning up those rear tires. That is a disastrous series of events, but more drama. That's Devin Hopkins, I think, off the track.
Interesting. I think that was in front of Heimbecker as well. He'll get the car back going. No, excuse me, Jeremy Hall. Maybe that was the other car that you saw that was stuck on the inside. Things started out so calm, but it is not so calm now that we are a couple laps into this race. Still more side-by-side battling down through Fanyes. Here's the replay. Yeah, off to the outside, thankfully stays out of the wall. The gravel kind of slowed him enough. Oh, but nearly gets hit by two other cars coming across. It's a war zone out there.
Yeah, right as I pass it off to you, I just saw another two cars just fly off the track in a cloud of dust and steam. So clearly the Pouan section being a treacherous spot. There are 3 wide out there on the racetrack heading off into Blanchimont. That is going to be gutsy. Jeremy Hall in the midst of that. That's a big one.
Oh, surely he's going to have to come in for a spare car. That was Komatz, who absolutely plowed into the wall. Jeremy Hall, who joined him off into the kitty litter. The driver's going to have to calm down. We talked about this last night. It's the first race returning this season, and it seems like the rust needs to be shaken off by a few drivers.
Yeah, I feel like the rust either needs to be shaken off or it's going to get beaten off at the end of this race. We were talking about right in the lead up to this, and we talked about it a lot yesterday. This is a sort of racetrack where it is not good to try and shake the dust off. As you can see, as soon as that car hit the gravel trap, picked it up on two wheels. If he hit that wall upside down, he may have potentially ballparked it on the outside of Blanchimont. That was a huge moment, though. We'll say in the midst of all that, and I will say this sparingly because every single time I usually mention one of our colleagues here at RaceSpot, that's usually when the commentator jinx comes down and smacks these drivers like a falling anvil, crashing down on top of their head. J.R. Gregory running in ninth as a result of all that trauma. As we could see, that was a massive collision off on the outside, and you could see more trauma going in with that car following in suit.
Jeez, well, in the midst of all this, Rex Jarwala has been given a black flag for the cause of an incident earlier on in the race, so he's going to have to go and serve that one. He hasn't brought it in yet. There's a lot to unravel here, but we'll try and keep track of all the action that's happening as we head down into the braking of Puhan once again. And it looks like the car of Nathan Abu-Haka with the Roxy livery on the car, currently running in 24th place, kind of sandwiched between Casion and Carbone Jr., it appears. Not able to attack either of them at this stage, but a good lap should put him in a good position to get up one more spot. So we'll see if he can get that run here as we jump up ahead to Gerbino once again. This is coming down to the braking of the bus stop chicane, and no dice as he continues to chase on Robert Neville. Ahead of them, Gibson and his rainbow liveried machine currently runs P2, up one from where he started.
And a sidecar to the discussion of these racers inside the top 10, a competitor who's occasionally in that discussion of the top 10, sometimes isn't. We've seen quite a couple of blinkouts from the 7-Eleven machine of Devin Hopkins. I think he's having some sort of technical difficulties as it stands right now. He blinked out a matter of about 45 seconds ago, still has yet to reappear, and that is something that we saw a little bit of last night. Maybe seeing it once again here this evening. We'll have to see if that car does reappear out there on the racetrack. Not looking like he will. He's still disappeared from our screens as here we go, duking it out.
I was going to say, it's a bit of a close battle here. Gerbino's going to take it away. Smooth move around the outside of Neville, who moves out of the podium positions thanks to that overtake. Scott Bauer's a long ways behind them, so it's mostly up between those two to decide things. Maybe three of them, like I said, Gibson a little bit up the road. And Mark Doran still hasn't completely run away either. Now, last night, what was it, about 25 seconds at the end that the win was apart? So Doran's not looking nearly as dominant as what we saw. This is a much closer race, and Ryan Cowley discovers why Radion is still considered one of the most treacherous corners in all of racing.
Yeah, and proving once again that the weight transfer in these cars can be a bit of a pain in the butt, especially cresting the top of the hill at very high speed. That sounds like a combination about as tasty as peanut butter and cyanide.
Not going to ask how that tastes, but as we come back to the
rather
battles,
bitter.
I would imagine so, and very short, unfortunately. But coming down into Stavelo 2, looking back at Rondeau in the 0-1-1 now, coming around these fast double apex right-handers that set you up in the long run into Blanchimont. Now from the view of Rondeau, looking ahead, this is Charlie Boyer that he's trying to attack. This is for sixth position, and he's going to position himself a little bit for the inside, but then backs out of it. Does it look like Bowers has a little damage on the rear of the car, though?
Yeah, it does. That bumper looks like it's frowning a teeny tiny bit. Not sure how he picked up that damage, did the Charlie Bauer behind the wheel of that 013 machine. But either way, that damage has been picked up. I gotta wonder how that's affecting him heading down the straightaways, because if he's got some damage on the bumper, I gotta imagine there's a small, at least a tiny bit of a tweak to the diffuser on that car as well. Wonder how that's affecting the downforce. Wonder how that's affecting him heading down the straightaways. We saw a lot of this last night. Any cars with a little bit of aero damage in a field as tightly packed and tightly knit as this one is. You have a small little aero tweak and you can drop down like a stone thrown into a pond. So we'll have to keep eyes on that 013 machine, whether or not he's going to have to defend like a lion, heading down these straightaways to hold off that 011 of Marc Rondeau. Let's look as they head their way down the Kemmel straightaway. Will Rondeau go for a move? He's not feeling a lot of pressure from J.R. Gregory right behind. Our RaceSpotTV colleague still running in a firm top 8 spot, slotted fittingly in P8. But right now, looks like, I was just going to say it was calm between these two. Then I thought Rondeau was going to try and sweep around the outside off into turn number 7.
Yeah, he almost got the over-under, and he got the run, but he didn't have enough straightaway down here into Rivage, so he'll back out of it once more. Rondeau's still putting a lot of pressure on, and you're right, that's going to be such a disadvantage here in this first half of the race, first 2/3 really, for Charlie Boyer, with the rear diffuser all out of sorts there. You definitely need a car to be planted through corners like this, down through Poulan, and in fact, I'm looking at the gap between himself and Bowers. It's 4 seconds. So I get the sense that Charlie is the one who is the plug in the spigot here, but will he be for much longer? Because Rondeau tries to make a dive. They're going to make contact. Both of them go off, and instead it is J.R. Gregory who laps his way up to 6th.
And that's exactly what JR was doing, and that's exactly what he will be doing, laughing his way to the piggy bank, the kitty litter, the gravel trap, the spa crunch, the cereal gang spread all around the track, as I thought they were going to go 3 wide off into Stavolo. These racers clearly deciding to duke it out right now. This race, it started off so smooth and so tame, and then things just, everybody, I feel like everybody's seeing the red mist around here. It's incredible what we're seeing with that contact off into turn number 12. Not a spot that you usually think of as a surefire overtaking opportunity. Doubly so, the slightly ill-handling race car that ran wide off into the turn. Contact being made around the both of them go, and dragging some gravel off onto this track, which may be a factor throughout this race, as I thought we were going to see it dive off into the final chicane.
Yeah, we've had another black flag. Anthony Carbone Jr. Was being blamed for another incident about 14 minutes in, so we're starting to see more drivers come afoul of the race stewards coming down to the braking of the La Source hairpin, and Charlie Fair will hold off Marc Rondeau once more. Marc obviously back on track after that short incident. So here's Chad Casey on, and this is a big wreck here. It looks like coming up into the braking of Blanchimont, and wow, okay, it becomes a bit of a parking lot for a brief moment there on the outside of the corner.
Oh, and I am absolutely amazed that more racers weren't collected and all of that drama. Let's look at this, threading the needle. Yeah, having to check up big time as that car arriving to the scene of that former accident. You can see the smoke. Oh my. Okay, so it was a parking lot down into the turn right before and down to the bus stop. It became a car slideshow. As you can see, another car just basically driving at a completely perpendicular angle to the racing surface.
So we must have had multiple incidents right next to each other there at the end. Okay, so here's what caused that next one. Just under braking, looks like car lost control, and the 15 was knocked aside, who has also decided for some reason he wants the 60 on the side of his car just to confuse us. But wow, amazingly, nobody hit him after that initial contact.
We'll call him the 1560 car as he headed his way off through there, a 360 down into the bend. And let's take a look at this for Gary Reese. While the first drivers arrived at the scene of that, and he goes for a spin as Aaron Sundays had a moment off in real life. That's down to turn number 12. What has happened to him as of recent? The driver of the 331 car was running rather good. I apologize. That wasn't into turn number 12. That was into turn number 14. But either way, Sunday off the track in a big manner. His good run going to end here.
Down to 22nd position from that loss. It's looking a lot like if you keep it on the track. Oh, and did he have some help? I think that was Heimbecker that we saw near him there for a brief moment. Okay, so that's Heimbecker right there. Heimbecker comes across. Oh, and he didn't anticipate his braking and just kind of got into the back of him. Huh, that was a bit weird.
You know, I was thinking as soon as I saw the positioning of those cars that, you know what, this is probably just him checking up, locking up the rears, and down to the turn he goes. I remember from my karting days having a kart with very sensitive rear brakes. You'd basically breathe on that brake pedal and feel like you'd be pulling a handbrake in one of the other Dirt Rally video games at full speed. It was not a very pleasant experience. That's basically what happened to Sunday a few moments ago. A bad mistake, to be sure. That's going to really put him on the back foot. But hey, still got a lot of racing left to go. Think of the drama we've had up to this point, and then realize the fact that we're only a tick over 18 and a half minutes in.
On board with Reber here in 18th position, looking back at Dale Green, chasing him down. He's awful close, and he's got a nice little toe, but trying to look down to the inside. Will he actually manage to make the pass? Abu Haka's got front row seats to the show, but he's not going to get much of one because it looks like Green's going to back out of the move. Will allow Reba to hold on that 18th spot. But now they've not only got Abu Haka in there, but David Nelson has joined them just out of shot.
So the battling really starting to get intense. These racers now, with all the drama and the smoke hopefully cleared, these racers have certainly shuffled around a decent amount and starting to get their own little packs and battles, as we may also have to bring in the important discussion, the pit stop discussion, getting to the point where the pit window will be opening here soon. Most of the pit stops that we've seen up to this point here, Joe, have been primarily because of the drama that we've had in the early stages, but would not be too shocked that in the matter of the next 5-ish laps, we could see some racers make that early call to come down pit lane. The undercut could potentially be a winning strategy here tonight, especially with all the drama that's taken place out there on the racing surface thus far.
So what, in all this craziness, I was just checking, we've only lost Ken Tubman. Now, they do have their spare car, so that helps out quite a bit. And this was a poor run by Abu Haka, I think going to get overtaken now by David Nelson, who's there now on your left-hand side and gets it done just at the important spot coming through Blanchimont. Doesn't look like there's going to be a re-attack as Nelson covers that defensive line down into the final chicane. We did have Hopkins, I believe, parked for a brief moment due to a connection issue, but I think Devin is now back out on the track. So is Dennis Lynn after repairing his car. So 38 runners still out there, but it's certainly looking like there's going to be those that are missing points that potentially were there before they had some incidents today. Nice run here from Reber, continuing to try to distance himself from this group.
As we jump to this side-by-side battling going on here at the end of the Camel straightaway, Dean Chapman trying to get that moved on a Mike Matson, but he goes off the track. Maybe a slowdown as right behind that's Marcel Yunes with a spin in the 004 car. He's now going to drop down potentially even behind the number 22 of Jason Barnett. But as that's been some drama going on with some racers right behind.
And coming to a halt, having to wait patiently. Somebody going off track on the other side of the chicane. So here's what put this car here. And that looks like some definite help. And unfortunately, just winds up having to sit off the racetrack, waiting for a chance to get back into it. He may have been braking because that car ahead was having some problems too. So that was a whole complicated situation of its own. Hopefully it'll stay calm long enough for me to mention that we're thrilled to have Princess Cruises as the 2025 PCA title sponsor. As the official cruise vacation partner of Series 14, they provide exclusive offers, including world-leading itineraries across a fleet of 16 elegant ships sailing to more than 330 global destinations. Reach out to the PCA concierge team to book your next adventure today by calling 833-679-2188. So, it is currently Mark Doran who is still leading. He's only ahead by 2 seconds over Gibson, and Gerbino is up into the podium positions, up at the front. We're watching Matson a little bit behind them right now. He's in a train, it looks like. I think that's being led by Gregory, and then that's Martin behind Chapman. Then you've got Matson, and then Heimbecker has, Heimbecker's done a really good job of getting back through the field. He's up to the top 10 again.
And putting on a very solid recovery drive is that driver, the number 14 machine. Had a little bit of drama not too terribly long ago, but ever since then, despite the fact losing at 6 spots ever since the drop of the green flag, you compare that to where he was at one point in time not a while ago. Pretty nice recovery. So let's see if there will be some more spots gained from Heimbecker. This is running pretty all right now. Back into the top 10. That's a pretty good way to start off this season. And we brought this up a lot last night, Joe, and there's a lot of truth said in it. So I think it will be a consistent thing that I mentioned throughout all these seasons, especially in the season opening rounds here in the Porsche Club of America. It's a short season. These racers only have 7 rounds, so you really can't afford to have a really bad night. If you can minimize those bad evenings and be consistent, as everybody else is about as consistent as expired mayonnaise in some cases, you can come out smelling like a rose. I've covered championships where racers have just been that consistent force. They may not even have visited victory lane throughout that season, but they're just so consistent as everybody else fluctuates and goes up and down in their results like a roller coaster that they can walk away from a season with the championship. So keep an eye on some of these racers making those good recovery drives and minimizing any sort of damage that may take place throughout their races this season.
And they do have that drop week as well. Heimbecker might need that this time, unless he has even more impressive passes here to the end. Of course, we haven't managed to get to any of the pit stops yet, or at least I don't think anybody's taken their scheduled stop at this stage. And they have 65% maximum fuel available for the car, so it's limited to what the real Cup cars are able to do if you're basing it on that. Which means they'll probably get to, about 20 to 15 minutes left to go, and then they'll be to the end of that pit window closing up. We've jumped a little bit farther back to Cowley behind Barnett. This is for 12th position. Barnett goes off course, just getting a little bit too hot into Blanchimont, but he's going to have the inside on Cowley down into the final chicane. It is wheel-to-wheel stuff between the pair of them, but it looks like Cowley has the better run off the corner, only briefly. Now Barnett is back on it as they accelerate towards La Source. Under braking, Barnett, just unable to get it done behind. A little bit of a lockup from Rondeau on his recovery. I say recovery, Rondeau's actually back to where he started this race, interestingly. We look back from Cowley now with Barnett behind him. And up and over the hill. Can either of them get a run? A big run by Cowley. Look at him absolutely distance himself.
Yeah, picking up a whole head of speed, heading down the Camel straightaway. Will he be close enough? Will he go for that move? I don't think he will. So Ryan Cowley, after that mistake not too terribly long ago, off into Blanchimont, making up from it. I'm surprised he didn't pick up a slowdown in the midst of all of that as well. We'll say I'm a little bit surprised as well, Joe. We haven't seen a lot of racers pick up a slowdown up to this point. I'm honestly shocked by that. We've seen some racers certainly utilize the track limits to their heart's content, run over those curbs and hit the inside curves like they're going out of style. It's been rather smooth, though, in terms of drivers picking up slowdowns. Drama out there on the racetrack, to be sure, but haven't seen nearly as many slowdowns, at least in the early stages of this race. 4 minutes shy of the halfway mark. I haven't seen as many slowdowns as we saw in the opening race of the pro season last night. I'm a bit surprised.
That's an excellent point, but I wonder if some of that comes down to the fact that this is the next step down. So the pros are obviously going to be really pushing the limits of this track. So you'll see them, just overstep that boundary. Maybe these drivers not doing it nearly as much, but again, I said it earlier, you keep it on the island, you might have a good result. So you don't really need to risk those slowdown penalties. Just keep the thing pointed forward on the black stuff.
Yeah, that is a perfect point to raise there, Joe. If you could just be there at the end to finish first you have to finish. I have read that in a fortune cookie before, that these racers can just have that emboldened onto their steering wheel, whether they have to write it down on Sharpie, write it down on their monitor. That I wouldn't advise at all. Whatever they need to do to burn that into their head, if they can just hang on and hang true to that all throughout this event, they could come out of this race with an absolutely fantastic result. It goes back to what we said a few moments ago. Just keeping it clean throughout the season could work look at, well, as look at Heimbecker trying to get it moved on James Martin down into Eau Rouge. That would have been gutsy from the 14.
Oh, but he has a nice little cut back. He carries his speed well, but they start to even out. Now that they get to the top of the hill, he's still inching forward. And yeah, Martin gave that one up. He saw the writing on the wall. And Kellen Heimbecker is going to take 8th place, so nicely done. The good news is if they use the Sharpie on their monitor, they can just use whiteout to get rid of it. I'm not wrong with that one.
I'm not sure what to say.
All right, so from, gosh, how far down do we see? 14th or lower, I feel like, for Heimbecker, and now up to 8th position. Really, really impressive stuff. The 004 here. Trying to figure out where we're watching. Well, that's a big difference, disappearance there for Marcel Eunice in 12th position. So he's going to have to hope that that solidifies so he doesn't get told to pit by race control. Jason Barnett, the car behind him, but we were riding on board with Ryan Cowley once again in 11th. He has lost touch with Matson in a huge way. It is 11 seconds between them.
Yeah, so the gap's certainly ballooning out a little bit farther towards the front of the field, the top 10 in their own zip code compared to everybody else. I think that's a product of a few things. One, decent chunk of these racers have been involved in at least some sort of drama, whether it be drama that's resulted in them going off the track or just drama going on around them where they've had to take a slightly different line, probably hit the brakes a little bit to avoid any sort of contact. We've also seen these racers get involved in their own squabbles and battles. That could be part of the reason why that gap has really ballooned out between Ryan Cowley in P11 and James Martin rounding out the top 10 as it stands right now. I do want to ask, though, at this present moment, you raised this point a little bit earlier on in the broadcast show, talking about lap traffic. Only have one car that's one lap down. That's Dennis Lynn in the 124 machine, who we saw actually pick up a meatball flag on the first lap of the race. So he had to come in, take that spare car, take the faster pair, and rejoin the race. Outside of that, though, I think the closest we would have to another car going a lap down is the driver running right in front in terms of track position is only about a minute and a half behind this man, your race leader of Mark Doran. So may not see that for a decent period of time, as here's David Nelson making a call to come down pit lane, the 114 machine. The pit stop's now officially potentially underway.
All right, first to blink. He'll lose a couple positions, but he'll be back out and he'll be good to go. Oh, but he misses his pit stall, has to back into it. That is a critical mistake here. Number of seconds, unfortunately, given away with that one. Meanwhile, up to Dale Green once again. Uses that slipstream well. Going to look around the outside. Tries to spot the brake marker. It's a game of chicken down into Lacombe, and he will take it away. Nicely done.
Yeah, pretty slick move. That is the spot where we're going to see these racers put on the most amount of overtakes. You can go for it in other spots, but we've also seen it end poorly, going for some moves into other spots, even down to the bus stop chicane. You know, you occasionally see some racers stick a wheel down the inside. You look at lower formula racing running around this track. You can see some racers go for some dives heading off through there. Here in these much bigger Porsche Cup cars, all through that final chicane, going for a move and racing side by side. There's pretty much two ways that's going to work. Either somebody's going to get bumped off and they'll have to take a quick trip off the track and run an interesting interpretation of track limits through the final turn, or it's probably going to result in some sort of contact. There is not many good ways where side-by-side racing in these big Porsche Cup cars can end rather well off through that final few turns. So, speaking of,
Turbino just went for a move on Gibson. That was for P2. It didn't quite work out. He was on the radio about something there. They don't like the drivers complaining to one another. Let's take another look at it. He was from a little ways back, but it wasn't completely outrageous. I could see why he might feel a little hard done by. That was a little bit of a chop.
Yeah, I think both those racers may have a little bit of beef with each other, and understandably so. I think Gibson's probably gonna look behind and be like, "Hey, dude, you came from a mile behind," and Garbino's gonna be like, "Hey, you didn't really give me enough space on the inside line." It'll be interesting to see how race control judges that situation. But for now, though, these racers still close together out there on the racetrack. 2/10 now, 10th and a half now, 1/10, and they're side by side once again, heading down into the braking zone through the Lacombe chicane. Now, Gibson gonna hold on to that spot in a very flashy, I gotta say, a very nice looking 911 Porsche.
Yeah, I do appreciate the 911 car with that rainbow livery, but he's going to have hard work with Gerbino really on it right now, looking to try and push, maybe wanting to get that track position before we get to the pit stops.
Yeah, that's a good point that you raised there, Joe. As we get a little bit farther and a little bit farther along in this stint, and a little bit closer to that pit cycle now officially opening for a lot of these racers, we're going to see them turn up the wick a lot. That's rather odd to say, considering I think the wicks have been turned up and then some thus far here this evening. These racers have been throwing haymakers at their competitors. Been rather awesome to see from our perspective here in the broadcast booth. I'm sure these racers maybe a little bit iffy about some sort of moments that have undergone with them, as we see the 011 car with a big snap off through a Rouge and Radion, going to impact the wall. I think that front nose is going to be rather sad as a result of that moment, but no, we will see these racers get a bit more on the antsy side, for lack of a better term, as we get farther along in this stint and closer to those pit stops.
Yeah, so Rondeau with a couple issues here today. Here we go, back to the scene of last time where we had the cars come together. Gerbino trying the other side, and I don't think that one's going to quite work out. Both of them going deep, though, into the corner, neither willing to give way. Gibson will once again come out ahead, but the more they fight like this, the more that Robert Neville is starting to regain on them. So he lost positions early, but it looks like he's in the hunt to try and come back. Heimbecker as well. He's hunting down, or was hunting down, Chapman. Has he got by him? Not quite yet. He's trying to squeeze him down to the inside. He'll switch back out to the racing lane, and he will finally have that position. Look at how tight it is between Gerbino and Gibson still. And Gerbino's ahead of him. What happened there?
Yeah, Gerbino getting that move done in that 113 car. Well done to Gerbino. Now he's starting to pull that gap to himself and Gibson. Not sure, there may have been a mistake, a slight trip up, if you would, from that 911 machine of John Gibson. Still holding on to a podium spot, but if those racers start to duke it out a little bit more, you can see just in the span of the past couple of laps how the gap between Mark Duran and now your P2 finisher, P2 runner, I should say, still a long way left to go until the checkered flag of Gerbino is now about 5.5 seconds. As let's take a look at this. He swept around the outside, off into the bus stop. That's some gutsy stuff. They have gone to the head of Gibson a little bit. That's a shallow approach all through the final turn. Hit that curve looking pretty all right. And I wonder, did they maybe pick up a slowdown in the midst of all of that? Not sure. Was it just a send off into turn number one? That's not exactly sure what the deal was, but Gerbino gets it done.
I went back and checked. Oh, but now he goes off course, and he's going to give it right back. A critical mistake. Not only is he going to give one position away, but Neville moves on to the podium positions. I was about to say, Gerbino just outgunned him off of the La Source hairpin. Just got a good shot off the turn. Here it is right here. And, well, it was a great move until he unfortunately kind of shot himself in the foot.
Yeah, he got the move done. That's usually how it works, I feel. A driver puts on a storming move. It's like, oh, that's a good one. And then as soon as we finally realize how good of a move that was, that's when the racer has some sort of error that's going to take them out of contention. I will say, in all that battling and squabbling, scrappling, I'm not really sure what I was trying to say there, between all that stuff between those two, we now have Robert Neville getting in the midst of that battle as well. He's now in that P3 spot, right within striking distance of John Gibson. Would have been interesting if I said the scrappling there. People who live in the city of Philadelphia will be able to get that reference with the scrapple, but outside of that, I feel like I'm probably speaking gibberish to some people.
I do know what it is, but we'll talk about that later, because that was that replay was really interesting. I couldn't exactly tell what happened, other than just maybe outbraking himself into the corner, but that's not usually a turn that you see drivers do that. In the meantime, I think that was Neville using up one of his incident points in a very flashy way.
Yeah, that was certainly a sketchy moment as he crested the hill off coming out of Rouge and Radion. He's still running pretty all right. Pretty good spot for him in that very nice looking plaid blue machine. We saw him in that warm-up session, and I wonder how his reaction will be that we're focusing on his car a whole lot. We're not trying to give him a commentator's jinx. We just like the plaid, and we like the spot that he's running in right now. P3 will look to dust himself off after that moment a few moments ago. You can see the gap has really ballooned out. I think in the midst of all that, picked up a rather catastrophic slowdown, so that could be part of the reason why that gap has ballooned between himself and John Gibson. But we do have those pit stops to worry about here soon. Only 22 and a half minutes left to go in this race, and this was right about the time that we started to see a lot of racers make that decision to come down pit lane. So savor this lineup that we've got right now of the top 14 and everybody else throughout this field, because I think once those pit stops start, we're probably going to see it get turned on its head.
Good catch there. I did check, and it does look like Neville got a slowdown penalty coming up and across Radion. So that's why he's not only lost Gibson, but Gerbino is starting to catch back up to him. Just behind them, it is up to 7th now. Could be 6th soon, because that's Heimbecker in the yellow and blue with J.R. Gregory just in front with the multicolored car under attack now. It's a good exit coming out of Stavelo too, but don't think he's close enough to try and think about anything coming into Blanchemont. Let's see what happens as they head through this fast left-hander. Ooh, actually backs off a little bit. Almost looked like Dean Chapman might have a chance to try and run up the back of him, but no, he is going to have to sit tight and wait till later. Whoa, Heimbecker takes a big look. He's given space at the apex. I never thought that was going to be on, while in the meantime, Chapman bails.
Yeah, Chapman gotta say, you know what? These two are gonna try and go side by side off the final chicane. I'm gonna take the high road. I'm gonna make that call to come down pit lane. As here we go. It's still on between Heimbecker and Gregory. Heimbecker with a dive off into the turn, carrying a whole lot of speed. And now Gregory gonna be able to keep the momentum rolling, as Heimbecker gonna have to take a really shallow exit there. He's gonna be a sitting duck hang down the straightaway, but Gregory right behind. Probably not gonna get a lot of clean air on the nose of that car, so he's gonna have to lift all through Rouge and Radion, and there you can see that gap grow out. That's the double-edged sword with a bad exit, at least for the competitors right behind. If you got a slow exit, the driver right behind you, they're going to be able to catch you up big time, but at the same time, if they can't get that move done in that downhill run all through the classic pits down into a Rouge and Radion, if they can't make that stick, then they're basically going to be a sitting duck off through there. I mean, the dirty air coming off these cars, not like a Formula One car where it's so catastrophically awful, nobody can follow each other, but it's still a pretty big hole in the air that is getting punched by these Porsche Cup cars. So if you're stuck behind, heading off through the fastest section of the racetrack where downforce matters the most, yeah, your tires are not going to be happy, and you're not going to be very happy either.
This is Aaron Sunday in the purple and white with Dean Chapman just behind him. Chapman, having just taken his pit stop, is now the highest driver to have pitted, 16.8 seconds. That's a little longer than what we were seeing last night, where drivers seemed to be between about 12 and 14 or 15 seconds for most of the pit stops. So back down through Eau Rouge between the pair of them. Chapman probably not too thrilled that he's come out in traffic, though.
Yeah, no, I gotta imagine he's not feeling particularly happy about how things have worked out as a result of all of that in the pit cycle. That is one thing that these racers have a lot of software to try and calculate. I've said this many a time when it comes to pit stops. If you come down pit lane and you exit out in the midst of just a titanic battle, you're not gonna be feeling very good, as that's Mark Dorn, your race leader, making that call to come down pit lane with about 19 minutes and some change left to go here. Let's see if he can hit his marks perfectly on the slightly undulating and bumpy pit lane. Through into that first pit box, he's going to go. Hits his marks rather well. Let's see the pit stop from your race leader.
Watching the time again, we're looking between 12 and 15 seconds for a decent time. It's up to 12, 13, 14, 15. It's a bit long, 16.3. He finishes up. He's back out. Will he be in clean air? Yes, he has the track to himself. So now both he and Gibson going to be pushing like the Dickens out there to get themselves some speed, maybe try and overtake, or at least in the case of our former leader, to try and hold on to that lead. Neville's still out there, Gerbino's still out there, but they're a bit behind Gibson. I think it was about 2 to 3 seconds, so it'll be a big ask to try and catch up to him. Not impossible, but you never know. He's still got Neville there right behind in what is now second place.
And, I'm wondering, on the subject of the 113 car of Jake Gerbino, whether or not there could be a bit of damage on that machine. We haven't really seen the same spark out of him that we saw a little bit earlier on. So whether or not there's some damage, whether or not he's just saving up his stuff for a late race charge, we'll just have to find out. I will say, rather impressive form from that driver of the 113 car. He's been running smooth all throughout this race. He's got involved in some drama and had that mistake a little bit earlier on, which was certainly a detriment, but hey, not the first time we've seen a racer lock up and go for a quick trip and quick adventure off into the gravel traps, and probably will not be the last of that we saw here, that we see here tonight, I should say. But Jake Gerbino, we're still running in that podium spot, at least for now. We still have to wait for all the pit stops to shake out, but even if he walks away from this race with a top 10, I think that's still a pretty good challenge from him.
Now, there's still about 17 or 18 cars that do need to take a stop. Let's watch and see if either of these two go in. That's a negatory. So we've got an opportunity. We do, again, want to mention that we're thrilled to have Princess Cruises as the 2025 PCA title sponsor. As the official cruise vacation partner of Series 14, they provide exclusive offers, including world-leading itineraries across a fleet of 16 elegant ships sailing to more than 330 global destinations. Reach out to the PCA concierge team to book your next adventure today by calling 833-679-2188. Ride on board with Neville once again, up and across the Radion corner, and I was a little afraid that he maybe got a slowdown penalty, but it looks like he is clean. I'm not seeing one marked next to his name, but he did lose a little bit of time, so about half a second behind Gibson. Heimbecker, after his early incident, still sitting 12 seconds behind them, but we're seeing more and more drivers pit in as Gerbino has finished his stop. Bowers has. It looks like Gregory and Matson have.
So one more wave of racers expected to come down pit lane now. That's got a decent amount of them taken care of. They've come in for their service. They've made that call to come down pit lane, but we still have some more that we're waiting out for. John Gibson in front of Robert Neville. Those two, this is a time to, it's time to strike while the iron is hot. Make hay while the sun is shining. Insert simile here. This is the time to peak for these competitors. Set those good times. Set those good laps. Miss every single falling anvil that tries to come down on you and hit every single apex that you can. This is the money laps. These are the money laps for these racers. If you can go through this stage where everybody else has made that call to come down pit lane and you're out there on barely any fuel, probably some tires that are shrieking in a bit of pain, you need to impress. This is the time where a race can be won or lost. It would be a big swing for these racers to try and close up that gap, because it was a rather big difference between themselves and Mark Doran when that pit cycle took place. But hey, if they can make it work, I've seen Stranger Things. I don't even have a Netflix account.
Well, Gibson is approaching that pit entry once again. This is going to be a big moment. He is going to pit in. So is Neville. Not too surprised. I figured we're pretty close to the end of that pit window. So now we got to watch and see where Doran winds up, because he's coming up to Blanchimont now as these two are just trying to spot their pit boxes. The time was 16.3 stationary for Doran. What are Gibson and Neville going to mark?
Yeah, keep an eye on the times. Keep an eye on how it'll work out for them as we look at your race leader, your former race leader, I should say, of Mark Doran, down that pitch stretch into turn number one. He's going to jump out in front of Robert Neville and Gibson as they're now out and away. Got that shortcut run as missing it off a little bit there down to turn number one. That's given those two the opportunity. Doran missed the turn. He went deep into turn number one. As much as they may not be right on top of each other, John Gibson right there to pounce.
Yeah, he probably lost, what, a good half second with that wide corner. So it would have been not quite as close. And the bad news is the slipstream could start to take effect. Gibson within 1 second of him. And yeah, I can see those numbers coming down between the pair of them. This is huge for John Gibson. There has been new life breathed into his race.
Yeah, and that right there is the power of just sticking with it. Oh, as we see some side-by-side racing, that's a battle for fifth between Heimbecker and Scott Bowers off into turn number 5 and 6. They're going to go off through the Lake Combe chicane, and that'll be the battle for P5 and P6. Incidentally, looks like it'll be the 14 of Heimbecker holding on to that spot for now. Oh, as he goes way deep down into Ravage of turn number 8, nearly loses out on that spot yet again. But no, shows you that in these races, if you could just stick with it, never count yourself out, you can still find yourself in a very good spot come time for the end of this. If you're Robert Neville, you may need to set in some good lap time just to stay with those racers right in front. But hey, even if he holds on to that spot, a podium is still a pretty nice way to get the season up and rolling.
I agree. It's been a great run, up 1 from where he started. Neville, unfortunately, down 1, but Gerbino up 4 into that 4th place. What is problem there with Abu Haka? He's going to lose his spot there through the Lacombe chicane, and he got some help. Unfortunately, just getting tipped around and eventually able to make it back out into the track. Two hits that sent him off into the runoff area. I wouldn't be shocked if that was some sort of penalty, honestly.
Yeah, I would not be shocked either. As you can see, more dust getting kicked up in the air with a racer cutting it close on the inside as he was trying to rejoin the racetrack. The double tap down into the chicane. It's the first real on-track incident that we've seen in a decent period of time. Despite the drama in the early stages, these racers were able to settle into a groove rather firmly. I'm going to ask you this here, Joe, as we ride on board with Rex Jariwala, who had his moments a little bit earlier on in this race, and also had a bit of a sideways snap earlier on as well. Now that we're getting to the end of this, would you say these racers have finally been able to shake that dust off in an odd way, or do you think there is still some de-rusting that needs to be done?
I think I'm seeing some that have gotten into the groove and others that are still acclimating out there. So yeah, it might be until next race that they really feel more at ease throughout much of the pack. Let's continue to watch Jariwala try to size up and see if he can attack on Abu Haka. Down into the braking. No, he's a little too far back for that one. Both of them switching directions through this left-right, and they're both going to get an easy spot as the car in front of them spins off. That's Jonathan Reber, and he falls down to, looks like 24th position with that. Oh, and now another car off. That is Barnett. So, to back up my point of what you asked, Ron, yes, there's drivers that haven't shaken the rust off yet.
Yeah, I know. I think that was a rather... Whoa, Jackson, is that right there? I think it was Mark Doran, your race leader, having to avoid that drama, and now he's going to actually... No, my apologies. It's jumping back to battle a little bit further behind. The cars look vaguely similar, so my eyes tricking me at the wrong time. Jonathan Reber, though, still involved in a very close battle, trying to hold off on that P23 spot, as I still think that may have potentially been Mark Doran who arrived at the scene of that near accident first out of anybody. It was either him or the other car that we have on screen right now. Rather similar looking race cars, at least in my itty bitty pea brain. But either way, close quarter stuff down into turn number 1. Perfect time for me to ask that question as well. I'm like, how many of these racers have been able to shake off the rust? And then we see 2 individual bits of drama. You know, of all the tracks to start this season off at, Joe, this is probably the toughest one. Spa, again, a track that a lot of people have a lot of experience on. There's only so much that experience can do for you. This is a track that is known to bite anybody. Doesn't matter whether you're a rookie, whether you're a veteran, or whether you've only raced around this track a handful of times. It's the sort of track that will always bite, and bite hard, and it's indiscriminating in terms of who's going to bite. It's there's a very bad comparison, but I'll give it anyways. It's kind of like what they say about the Indy 500, especially in qualifying. Doesn't matter whether you're a veteran or a rookie, you're going to get bit out by the challenge here.
Yeah, I think that is a good comparison to make. It's a pretty steep challenge. Meanwhile, Abuhaka versus Jarawala continues on. He's a lot closer this time, but he's going to have to withstand the dirty air coming through Blanchimont. Let's see whether or not he can stick close enough, and that's a big no. He has fallen back and just needs to somehow find a way to keep with him until they get to this heavy braking zone of the final chicane. But he's only got maybe about 4 more laps to do so.
Yeah, not a lot of laps left as John Gibson and Robert Neville getting involved in their own scrap, as that could have ended in disaster. Off into Speaker's Corner, No Name Corner. It's interesting that turn has 3 names despite being called No Name, but Robert Neville nearly running into the back of that 911 car of John Gibson. That could have ended in disaster as they headed their way out through there. Gibson, I don't think he was able to turn up the wick enough to be able to challenge Mark Doran. He now holds on to a 2.6-second lead, which is certainly a lot smaller than what we saw last night in the pro season opener with a gap of about 26 seconds at the line. But still, John Gibson and Robert Neville going to give us a good battle to talk about for the final 2 podium spots as Doran looks to drive off into the sunset.
Yeah, that all started when Gibson went a little bit deep down into Ravage, and that kind of opened the door. Neville tried his best to sneak by, but he's not going to get it that time. 7 minutes left on the clock. Neville's still within striking distance. That unfortunately slowed up John Gibson so much that unless Doran makes a mistake, I don't think he's got enough time to try and reel him in. Back into the braking of the final chicane once again. No change between P2 and P3. Gerbino, who was closer to them, is now about 3.5 seconds back himself. So yeah, it's become more of a battle for best of the rest.
Yeah, that's really what it's feeling like, which, hey, we're certainly not going to complain about that. It's still battle, it's still hard racing, and with that moment they had about a half a lap ago, it is still going to be intense through to the fall of the checkered flag. I want to touch on the hard chargers throughout this season, though, as Charlie Ferrer is holding on to that, at least of the racers inside of the top 14. 18 spots gained ever since the drop of the green flag for the driver of that number 28 machine. Trying to look to see if there's anybody else who is just scythed their way through the field with any more strength. It's been a race of a lot of comers and goers. There have been some dropping down. One driver got to drop down big time, the 22 of Jason Barnett, picking up a disqualification. That, I believe, would have to be for incident points.
Yep, that would be the case. So he's our first to get bitten in this one. Abuhaka and Jarawala. It kicks off coming down into the chicane where we kind of expected it, but now they've got Jonathan Reber behind them. Kevin Orr is in the battle from 2 cars fighting one another to a 4-way battle here. They'll separate temporarily coming up into the La Source hairpin, and Kevin Orr manages to miss his braking point in all the excitement. So now it's gone back to 3 cars.
It's still a 3-car battle, though. It's still going to be intense in the run-up to the end of this race. A tick over 5 minutes left on the clock. That is just about no laps left to go here. So getting to the end of it, getting into crunch time. We'll say Mark Doran losing out on a little bit of time up at the front of the field as here we go. The side-by-side scrap going to continue once again down the couple straights.
Ooh, a lot of speed from Jarawala, but he's not as good under braking. Abuhaka comes back at him. They stay wheel to wheel, and still nobody is willing to give up as it switches back into Malmedy once again. Jarawala carries the speed the long way round. That's going to give him that 20th spot. Nicely done by the 7 car. A little bit of a peak coming from Reber, but he's not able to demote another position for Abuhaka. He'll have to wait until later.
Yeah, wait till later, but there's not a lot of later opportunities left. I'm trying to think now, if we have about 2 laps left to go here, what will be the amount of opportunities you really have to get a move done? In terms of ones I wouldn't necessarily say are easy, but a bit more on the realistic end, I'd probably say only about 4 or 5, maybe 6 at most left. If you go for some absolute dives, though, maybe about 10. I even think that 10 is a bit of a stretch there with that number. So running out of opportunities, running out of time, and running out of laps left to go here at Spa. This is going to be a rather tough deal to try and get this move done. Certainly opportunities left, but you need to take advantage of every single one of them.
You were talking about the hard chargers. Abu Haka definitely amongst them. 12 positions gained. Meanwhile, Jarawala, with that pass, is back to where he started this race, unfortunately. So it's probably been a bit of a frustrating day for him. That was wide in the background from Abu Haka in the Roxy car. Oh, and now it's going to be wide coming into the final chicane as he completely missed the corner. He'll come back to the track and there's been a disconnect. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, Jarawala picked up a DQ there.
Was that because of ghost contact?
I think potentially, because I could see just taking a look at the time, that wasn't any sort of off track there. I think as soon as that car buzzed by and was just even in the vicinity of that rear bumper of the number 7 machine, as soon as that happened, bang, DQ message popped up on our screen. And those are rather immediate, folks. We know, all of us know on this broadcast pretty much at the same time. So that right there, with a little bit of ghost contact, a little bit of netcode, whatever you want to call it, small little bit of not really contact at all, a couple of inches, that's going to be about an hour worth of racing all coming to naught. It has a huge lockup down into the chicane.
It looks like a lot of drivers struggling with the brakes and tires here at the end of this race. We're seeing a lot of overshooting of corners. That was Charlie Boyer this time that went beyond. So yeah, ghost contact, I am almost certain here. Didn't physically touch on our screens, but it must have counted it in the sim. And while I do feel for Jarawala, I will say that, you know, if you get within those 4 points by that stage of the race, then that is kind of up to you that you didn't play it a little bit more safe throughout the remainder of the previous laps of the race. Oh, here we go. Gibson versus Neville is on once again. In fact, Neville's got to run. He's coming down side by side into Eau Rouge, but he backs out of it, and he might actually get the run coming off of it. Up and over the hill. Tries to cut back. No, he doesn't have the momentum, but he does have the toe. They'll head up the Kimmel Straight. Gibson covers the middle of the track, leaves a little bit of an opening down to the inside. It looks like Neville's going to take it. They'll try and outbrake one another coming into the chicane. Oh, but he's a little bit too deep, and that is too much. He's going to have to give the time back. Gibson will get the spot, or I think he's going to have to give the time back. Let's see if he's still got the slowdown. And now he served it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, doing a little bit of investigative journalism, looking at the perspective of Robert Neville, I could see that distinct slowdown graphic. Neville certainly gave it the old college try, though, at the start of this final lap. The white flag in the air, Doran on track for a win. But all that battling, look right behind. That's Jake Gerbino in the 113 car. He's right there to pass. If these two have another scrap and one of them gets slowed up a little bit, or maybe if both of them get slowed up a little bit, that or Gerbino just has a killer final sector, we could have another driver getting involved in this battle for the final 2 podium spots with time running out.
He saw all that fun and said, hey, boys, I'll have a piece of that if you don't mind. Let's see if he can pick up on it, though, because he's going to have to hope they start just fighting amongst one another once again. And he's got very few opportunities left to do it, because this is out of Stavolo 2, down towards the braking at the final chicane. Doran just in front of them by about 5 seconds. Again, not the runaway that we saw yesterday in the pro class. The club class a little bit tighter at the front, but it is Mark Doran who managed to rebuff the efforts of a couple different cars here during this race as he comes through the last couple right and left onto the main straight. It is going to be victory for Mark Doran in race 1 of Series 14.
And what a drive for him as well. May not be the big gap that we saw last night, but he had command of this race from the drop of the green through to the fall of the checkered. Well done to Doran, and well done to Robert Neville. You can see the joy and jubilation from him walking away with the podium. Well done to all those racers. That was fun.
I'm glad he enjoyed that and was proud of what he did, because, yeah, that was a great run. He may have lost a position, but a podium here is hard to come by in the club series, the club class. Gerbino wound up having to settle for 4th. It was a quarter of a second between Gibson and Neville there at the end. And coming back down the order, got a nice little fight here between Yunus and Green, but Yunus is going to get that 12th position in the end. Also want to give a shout to Heimbecker. He did wind up with the top 5, so not too shabby considering what he was up against.
Yeah, despite having that setback very, very early on, that's not a shabby result at all. But here we go, side-by-side scrapping off into Blanchimont. Jolly Bauer looking to get back to form. It's been an unfortunate second half of this race for him as he thinks about it down the outside. But, oh, look at that. That's a big drop-off into the turn. This may be a scrap up to the line between these two. Got to loop it a little bit there. Gets a little bit squirrely. Not going to be enough. Not close enough in that 013 car to get at the line. It's a black flag, a disqualification for Gary Reese right at the end of this race.
Yeah, I think we'll see 32 of them manage to finish on the lead lap in this one out of the 39 starters, last of which is going to be Christian Braun, I think our only rookie in this race, if I'm seeing that correctly. We had a couple of them in the pros last night. So here he is coming up into the final corner now, and a collection of points into his lap as he crosses the line. So with race number 2 of our first couple weeks of racing out of the way, does see us crown Mark Doran in the first go of things, taking the victory by a little less than 5 seconds. John Gibson, P2, and Robert Neville will round out your top 3. Jake Gerbino will be 4th today, as Kellen Heimbecker will be P5. Scott Bowers, a nice race from him, is 6th, with Gregory in 7th and Matson in 8th. Dean Chapman 9th, and James Martin will get a top 10. From there, it'll be Ryan Cowley in 11th, Marcel Eunice in 12th, and Dale Green in 13th. Charlie Fair finished P14 today, with Mark Rondeau in 15th. It was Aaron Sunday finishing 16th today. He got into a little bit of an issue at one point in the race. Aaron Nations 17th and Andy Jenks in 18th. Ben Bulkley P19. Jonathan Reber fighting for that 20th position that he came home with. Chad Casion was 21st. Nathan Abuhaka, who outbraked himself late in the race but still managed 22nd. Charlie Boyer was right behind him at the finish for 23rd. Chris Sherburne 24th, and Jeremy Hall in 25th. From there, Steve Komatz was 26th and David Nelson in 27th. Kenneth Eskridge 28th and Kevin Orr 29th. Peter Sigourney came home 30th today, with the last few cars being Patrick Adamczyk 31st, Christian Braun in the 32nd spot. And then you have DNFs from here on down with Gary Reese, Dennis Lynn, Rex Jarawala, Jason Barnett, Anthony Carbone Jr., Devin Hawkins, and Ken Tubman. Definitely a number of drivers that will not be wanting to remember this day. In the meantime, I do believe we have Mark Doran ready to have a chat, and let's see how he feels about the end of that race. Mark, congratulations. You didn't ever really have the biggest of gaps throughout the race, but it especially looked like it got tight there after the pit stop.
Yeah, John's definitely keeping me honest there. I saw he pitted a couple of laps later than I did. I figured he was going for an overcut, and the crew chief told me, oh, he's coming out right in front of you. So I was pleasantly surprised when he was just behind. But yeah, I had to get my skates on at that point.
Is that what caused the overshooting of LaSource there when he was exiting the pits? Because we kind of noticed it. You may have been a little bit farther ahead if it wasn't for that little mistake.
Yeah, well, I was definitely thinking about where he was, trying to spy around the corner, see if he was there or not. Definitely, yes. So a little bit of a lapse of concentration there for sure.
Well, you still came away with the top spot. This raises the bar, though. Can you repeat victories when we go off to Watkins Glen?
Well, I would love to think so, but as it turns out, I'll be on vacation while you guys are all enjoying Watkins Glen, so no race for me that week, so I'll have to come back and try again in weeks after that.
Well, enjoy, not best of luck. Enjoy your vacation then. And sorry we won't see you, but it sounds like a good time. So again, congratulations on today.
Thanks. Looking forward to it. Quick shout out to Nicky and Last 10th. I would not be here at all without his help. So thanks to him. And of course, thanks to all the sponsors and Race Control and the steering committee. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do this. And it is such fun.
Great words there from Mark Doran, your victor here today. Up next, I believe we've got Ron talking to John Gibson and his incredible battle throughout this race.
And John Gibson now joining us here in the broadcast booth. John, welcome in to the booth. P2 for you at the end of this race. How about you talk us through that challenging race here at Spa tonight?
Yeah, thanks. First, I'd like to thank the PCA Sim Racing Steering Committee and also RaceSpot. I really enjoy this series, and the sim racing guys do a great job, and you guys do a great job broadcasting. So yeah, on that last couple of laps, I made a couple of mistakes. I had a slowdown that I had to manage, and then on the very last lap in corner one, I managed to hit the pit limiter by mistake, and that's where Rob and I kind of got side by side. But tried to hold my ground and stay clean, and managed to bring home P2. So really excited about that.
Yeah, you kept it clean all throughout this race. We talked about it here in the broadcast, how that was going to be a bit of a challenge. Just being there at the end was going to be super important. I want to ask if you could potentially elaborate that from your perspective behind the wheel.
Well, I know Spa is a tough track. There's many places that you can make mistakes, and my let's say approach to this race was to try and stay as clean as I could, be around at the end, and make as few mistakes as possible. That's what I think I did. Could have done a little better. If I can eliminate a few, I might have had something for Mark, but not today.
I mean, hey, all throughout this race at Spa, you kept it clean, and as it says on the back bumper of your car, you're going fast while sitting still. But John, thank you for joining us here in the broadcast booth. What are your thoughts heading off to Watkins Glen for the next round of the championship?
Another tough track, one of my favorites, so I'm really looking forward to it, and I can't wait to be here in 2 weeks. So really appreciate it again, and thanks to PCA Sim Racing and RaceSpot. Much appreciated.
Yeah, and thank you as well for joining us here in the broadcast booth. John, well done on the P2, and looking forward to seeing you out there Watkins Glen in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you.
And that leads us to our third place finisher, Robert Neville, who also had a pretty intense battle. But it looked like you enjoyed it there at the end, Rob. We had the camera on you, and we saw some fist pumps.
Yeah, so I've been racing since the middle of Series 9, and I started in sport. This is my first podium in any series race, so I was pretty stoked.
Holy cow, yeah, that is a reason to celebrate. So what was going through your mind throughout that race? Because like we said, you had to fight for it for quite a bit. So was there any thoughts that, okay, let's just settle for the third?
I tried not to think about where I was. I tend to be my own worst enemy, and mental problems tend to slow me down. So I had a mantra of, I'm just executing what I practiced, just roll with whatever happens. Don't just ignore where you are and just hit your marks.
Now you've made a fan here in the booth because Ron really loves your paint scheme, and we enjoyed the fact that you color coordinated with your stream here. Is there a story behind the plaid?
It's probably too long and boring. Basically, I started off trying to copy the old FAF livery, which was the red and black plaid, and then when I made my own, so the logo I have, this is my company, and I decided, well, I'm just going to make plaid using my company's color scheme, and then it just kind of stuck, and I've used it ever since.
I still love it. It definitely sticks out, and you do a fantastic job with your streaming setup here. But again, congratulations on the first podium. Go celebrate. That was Rob Neville here finishing third. But that, of course, takes us to the end of things, where we had mentioned we got one more to come later on. Watkins Glen will be September 18th for the next one. And another high-speed track with a lot of flowing corners should put on a great show, but a lot closer barriers at that one, Ron.
Yeah, I got to imagine that for these racers all throughout the Porsche Club of America world, that race at Watkins Glen in a couple of weeks' time going to be a rather ominous one. Those barriers going to be looming in a rather terrifying way. But in terms of the racing out there on the track, I think it's going to be absolutely spectacular. I adore Watkins Glen. I think these cars put on some brilliant racing action wherever they go. And I'm sure these racers are going to give us a whole lot of fun to talk about when the series returns in 2 weeks' time.
Well, a big thank you to everybody for tuning in tonight, as well as a big thank you to the steering committee at PCA Sim Racing, and of course the team behind the scenes, Hugo and Ron. However, until next time, I'm Joe Peak. Race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.